and I love Rece Davis. If you listen to my show, I think Rece is a real voice of reason. Hey, Rece, one thing I understand, it's funny, I was in Florida when the Notre Dame-Indiana game, and I had an Indiana shirt on, and some Notre Dame guy, recognized me, and he goes, hey, Dan, we're going to kick your ass. I go, you might, but before you go there, understand, I know we have sucked forever. So before you go there, right, before you tell me, I know. I watched the game with a bunch of people in an IU bar, that kind of thing, so I didn't really hear the comment, but IU people got upset. Rece, what's your reaction? In college basketball, we bitch about the 69th team or the 35th team, right? Yeah. So it's kind of normal that we're going to complain about 13 or 12, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think we should be surprised by the complaints or the critiques. I think from a standpoint of my critique on it, to me, you got to a position where the last couple of spots in the playoff, you had to say, okay, who was less objectionable than the others? And to me, now I had Miami in the mix at the end there, but, I understood that if you take Miami over SMU, who went to the ACC championship game, you create a problem. And, Indiana was less objectionable to me because the only loss was to Ohio State, but prior to the Notre Dame game. But I think what most of the critique was about, and I actually agree with this critique, it can't just be about not losing if your schedule isn't particularly demanding. And all conference schedules, particularly if you're in the Big Ten or the SEC, have a degree of being demanding. I would argue that Indiana's was not as demanding as some in the conference. I don't think any reasonable person would argue with that. But to me, if you were comparing them to the SEC teams, certainly it is true and in the SEC team's favor that they had a more difficult path. What is also true, in my judgment, is that all three of those teams that were being considered from the SEC did something that made them more objectionable to include Indiana and SMU. Alabama, chief on the list. You can't lose to a mediocre Oklahoma team in the manner in which it did when you'd already lost to a mediocre Vanderbilt team. Can't do it. South Carolina had lost to both Alabama and Ole Miss, with whom they were competing. And Ole Miss lost to, probably the second worst team in the SEC at home in Kentucky. All of them basically disqualified themselves. And you had to, and I thought the appropriate way was to find who was less objectionable. Now, I think Miami probably was better than SMU. That's just me. And Indiana had the one loss. But I think from a big picture standpoint going forward, what their critique is, don't evaluate the teams simply because your best trait is, well, you played a mediocre schedule and you didn't lose very often. You have to accomplish something, but this was one of the years in which the teams at the end of the line who got into the playoff, that sort of was the distinguishing characteristic. Did you not screw up as much as the other teams that you're being evaluated against?
Here's the deal. It's a hard thing because literally everybody in Indiana understood that what could have gotten them in there, the schedule, is what could keep them out of there, right. The schedule. Yeah. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And the other thing is this, and I didn't really say this because I really like being involved, being Indiana and being involved in the fun, right? But I was on the sideline, my wife and I, for the Ohio State-Indiana game. And I'm not going to lie to you, Rece. By the end of the game, I was saying to myself, okay, this is the same old Indiana team. Not, they go to Ohio State, and that game could have gone 10 minutes longer, and Indiana was going to get their ass kicked. It wasn't. They weren't coming back. The difference was stark to me. So I remember saying on my show, hold on here. If I'm on that committee and I really watch that game, I might have a problem putting Indiana in, regardless of 11 or 12 wins. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And I thought, what, Dan, when I watched that game and I stayed and watched, all of that game, the early in the game, I was like, you know what? I don't know if these guys are going to win, but they kind of looked the part. And, and then they had the miscue on special teams and a couple of things, didn't go their way. And, they struggled after that opening drive. But, look, this was when we're talking about whether Indiana truly merited inclusion into the playoff, which I think they ended up doing in this particular year. I mean, what a path they've followed. How far have they come when that's the discussion? Before the season started, Indiana folks would have been happy with 7 wins. Instead, they're a little annoyed they didn't get to play at home, in the playoff. So I mean, I think that's remarkable progress, and I think it's one of the benefits of this new system. I do think that over the course of time, that we are going to trade off a little bit, and I think I've said this to you before. We're going to trade off a little bit of the regular season. We didn't see that this year because it was so new, but you walk out of the Ohio State-Oregon game or even the Ohio State-Michigan game, and, you're somewhat devastated now if Ohio State wins the national championship. Are they really going to remember the Michigan game? I mean, in some quarters and probably when it comes around next year, but it's not going to take any luster off of that trophy, if they beat Notre Dame Monday night. So it's sort of, we're almost having to reorient the way we think about the season as a whole. And in the process, we're going to have to evaluate the best way to figure out which team should be in at the end of the line.
All right, let's move it on from that. You surprised at Notre Dame?
I'm not. I thought they would beat Indiana, and I actually picked them to beat Georgia. And it wasn't just because of Carson Beck, just sort of a feeling. I think that there's a really good energy around the team. I think Marcus Freeman has done a remarkable job. They seem to find a way to make winning plays. They've had their backs against the wall since their own debacle against Northern Illinois, and they've answered every challenge. So I'm not surprised that they're here. I do think that was the quintessential game against Penn State in which they found a way to win. Penn State helped them for sure. I think by and large, if you looked at it on one of those play-by-play basis, Penn State probably got the better of it for most of the night, but they weren't able to build a lead and put them away. So I'm not surprised that Notre Dame is there. But there comes a time almost always in any championship run where you have to have the horses, the explosive playmakers. Ohio State has more of those. So I think it would be a really difficult task. There's almost a certain formula prescription that Notre Dame's going to have to follow against Ohio State. And to me, it's very similar to the Michigan game. They're going to have to run the ball, shorten it, kind of control the clock, keep getting first downs, and then come up with some key turnovers and kind of force some mistakes from Ohio State. That's really the only path to victory that I see for Notre Dame, but they've executed it, and they certainly did against Penn State. So, bet against them at your own risk.
Sports is weird, right? Jack Sawyer's the guy mad after Michigan game, and Jack Sawyer's a roommate of Quinn Ewers. Jack Sawyer makes the hit. Sports is just crazy with that kind of stuff. And by the way, to your point, I love Notre Dame's defense. Drake Bowen is a kid from my hometown, from my high school. Mm-hmm. And Drake Bowen, Rece, this was awesome. He signs with Notre Dame. He's going to make the announcement. A lot of guys do it in school, whatever. He does it from this little dive bar in Highland, Indiana, right? This little dive bar that his dad used to go to, right? That's a Catholic thing. We drink, we play bingo, and we raise money. It's what we do, man.
Man, you know what, Dan? I was at Lou Holtz's 88th birthday celebration last weekend. And there were so many of the 88 championship team members there and other guys who played for Lou over the years. And, the feeling and the vibe surrounding the camaraderie, the unity that they have behind this team and hoping that they have another national championship is something really cool. And it's guys like Drake, it's guys like Jack Kaiser, in addition to the guys who have transferred in, who have just embraced everything about Notre Dame, most notably Riley Leonard, and there are several others, who have played key roles in this run. But I think it's a really cool story, and I wish I had been the first to phrase it this way. I don't know who it was, but someone I read recently I thought hit the nail on the head. This team, and particularly Marcus Freeman, they've made Notre Dame likable. I mean, for years you either loved or hated Notre Dame, and I think that I think Notre Dame is a very likable team and story in this season, in this playoff.
Yeah, I do too. And, like Jeremiah Love, like when Jeremiah Love ran by our little All-American guy Pons, I'm like, wait a second, this guy's really good. And then the run he made to score the touchdown was unbelievable. Like Notre Dame, Rece, to your point, Notre Dame, I know it's cliche with Notre Dame, touchdown Jesus and all that, but there's a feel about this squad. I'll tell you something else. They hit hard. They hit really, really hard. They're a ferocious defense, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah, Al Golden's has done great. And the thing that people forget is that from their opening day starting lineup, what they thought would be their first 11, they've got 4 guys down, including their best corner, Benjamin Morrison, who I think is going to be an outstanding player in the NFL. He went down. Everybody knows in the Indiana game that Riley Mills went down, and R.J. Oben has played more and played really well after transferring from Duke after Riley got hurt. But, they've lost a number of guys. They've lost guys on the offensive line. They just got Jagasaw back in the Penn State game. They didn't really know if they would. He was hurt prior to the opener. He was supposed to be the starting left tackle, hasn't played all year. And according to one of those services who grade the performance, he came in after their guard got hurt, Spindler, and played against Penn State. And I think it was Pro Football Focus, so I'm not positive which service it was. One of them had this guy who hadn't played a snap all year due to injury as their highest graded offensive lineman against Penn State. So it's been like whoever gets the chance for Notre Dame has stepped into the fray and played very well.
Rece, you know more about this than me, so I always ask smart people. 2 years ago, Urban Meyer calls me, and he goes, hey, man, this Deion Sanders thing is real. This isn't a publicity stunt. He went to his practice, spent a weekend. He goes, these coaches coach. Players are coming in. And, he took a bad program and made it good. Your thoughts on Deion Sanders staying at Colorado, and is the Dallas thing a natural fit for him?
You know what, Dan? This is going to sound strange for someone as charismatic and flamboyant as Deion. I think he plays better in college because Deion at his heart is an old school, hard-nosed disciplinarian. He's a tough guy. I've had friends who coached on that staff for him, and you see the way he is not afraid of his players, which is something that is, which seems like a weird thing to say for any coach, but I think in this era, it's something. He's not afraid of his players, and he's done a tremendous job. I hope he stays in college football. Now, would you say that he can't be successful in the NFL? No, I wouldn't say that, because the credibility that comes with his accomplishments, and now that he's had success as a head coach, I don't think it would be received in the Cowboys, for instance, locker room that, they're just bringing in a former star, and what does he know? Well, now he's proven to have some coaching chops. He's certainly got the credibility as one of the greatest athletes ever to perform in sports, from playing football and baseball at the highest level at the same time. But I think his demeanor and his attitude and his approach and his desire to try to help young people make the most of their gifts and be the type of people that they should be. And look, when I say this, we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I know that I'm not trying to say Deion has been perfect throughout his life, but I think where Deion is right now is that he really wants to have an impact on maturing young men, and I don't like to call them kids anymore, Dan, because they're not. First of all, they're professionals, are getting paid. Second off, they're 18 to 24, 25 in some cases. So they might not be fully mature men, but they're men. And I think that age group is really Deion's sweet spot and the impact that he can have on them. There's a fun vibe around the program, with Lil Wayne and every celebrity known to man showing up. But he also doesn't mind starting practice over. He also, and he said, we're going to take your check if you're not in the front row of class, if you don't do what you're supposed to do. And, all of these things kind of have that old school vibe. And I think he plays better in college. And because I'm a college football guy, I hope he stays. I hope he stays in college football.
I do too, but if I'm Jerry Jones, I got to get some juice in that program, and I got a lot of money. I would.
That's fair. That's a fair point. Yeah,
I'm with you. Yeah, if you and I'm older than you, but Cowboys, people can bitch about them, and your network, ESPN, literally, Greenberg said yesterday, if Deion Sanders goes to the Cowboys, we're talking about him as the lead story every day until the football season starts, right? I mean,
you might as well be honest about it. That's the truth, right?
Yes,
I mean, it is. Yeah,
yes,
yeah. So,
I know, and I'm with you. I love the fact that he said that about the check. But let me ask you is that possible? I don't know enough. I'm getting so many. I talk to so many coaches, and I get different vibes on. Can you take a check? Can you not? Like, is that just talk, or this stuff? Is that real?
I don't know. I would imagine if you're dealing with a contract, it wouldn't be. I think still the most powerful thing is playing time. And you saw Rick Barnes the other night take a guy out and said he's not doing what he's being paid to do. Now that you can do, so that's probably still the best method. Now maybe there is some deal where it's tied to behavior, performance that you have to meet these clauses or else you sacrifice it. I don't know. So anyway.
I got one of my best friends growing up, kindergarten, was a football player, and he goes to Grand Valley State as a GA, and his roommate's Brian Kelly. And my guy goes he's a producer out, a director and all that in Hollywood, and Kelly becomes Brian Kelly. You're an Alabama guy. You understand the SEC. Kelly leaves, says what he says about Notre Dame. People are killing Kelly. Two things. Why is Kelly so unlikable? And is this like a total smack in the face to Kelly saying I can't win the national championship and here's at Notre Dame?
A little bit, but it was probably true. Now, here's my take on this, Dan.
What changed?
I've gotten to know Brian a little bit over the last few years. So when he's coach at Notre Dame, then we have a very good mutual friend. I've gotten to know him a lot better. I like Brian Kelly, and even before I got to know him, I viewed him as one of the top coaches in the sport. He was that, and he is that. But everything, almost every coach in the history of life, almost every employee at any job, it gets stale. And I think that for Brian at Notre Dame, that might have been true, that he perceived that LSU was going to give him a better opportunity, better access to players, opportunity to win, because he had done it very well. People forget what he did for Notre Dame. He made Notre Dame relevant again. He got them into the playoff. He got them into the national championship game. And he did great things for Notre Dame, but it's probably one of those relationships that it was time for both to go their separate ways because there were frustrations on both sides. So it might have been true that for him at that moment in time, better shot at LSU. For what Marcus is doing, he's gotten everybody aligned. Everybody, Dan, I keep referencing this event, the heaviest of hitters at Notre Dame at this, and they are all 1,000,000,000% right in alignment with Marcus Freeman. They are behind him completely. Love the guy. He's the coach. It's all good there. So because of that alignment, you catch a little lightning in a bottle, you get the right chemistry with the right group of guys, and you start winning. And now he's also recruiting at a very high level also. They're being very judicious and wise in the portal. So many of their guys have worked out this year. So, I think all of those things have helped it work for Notre Dame. But to the obvious question, if I were Brian Kelly, and maybe this is just ego talking, I think I just want to be out of the country and away from a television set on Monday night, man. I just, every day has enough trouble of its own without you worrying about somebody else's troubles and, or whatever. And that's going to bring him some trouble. And either way you slice it, he's a tough guy and he can handle it. But look, we're all human, man. I remember the great Dick Vitale, and I've probably told you this before, said to me one time, and not that Brian got fired, I'm not saying that, but Vitale once said, "You show me a coach who roots for the school who fired him, and I'll show you a liar." You know what I mean? So I mean, it's you might be you might. I don't know. Maybe you would know better than I. Is that true? Would you?
100,000%. Yeah. Like last night, Indiana gets crushed. I got a bunch of dudes that used to work in Indiana texting me, "Burn it down, burn the whole thing." Yeah. I'm like, whoa, wait a second.
Yeah, easy, fellas, right? Yeah.
Yeah, hang on here. Like, I'm over it. I've moved on, but I get it. You mentioned the Bible earlier. That is big in the Bible. Like, one of the things you cannot do is have envy for somebody else. Worry about your own problems. Go to God with your own problems.
Yep.
But I said this on a show. There is no human being alive, and I mean this literally, no human being alive that rooted against Notre Dame more in this against Indiana than than Brian Kelly. He just didn't want to hear it. I don't care how good a guy he is, and I'm with you. I think he's a good dude. Hey, I want to go back. All right, I have a theory. All right, I want your thought on this, and it's been shot down by every Ohio State guy. I mentioned my wife and I were on the sideline for the Indiana-Ohio State game, and it's my first time at a game in the Horseshoe, and it was awesome. But Rece, I look up, and they've got jerseys and championships and all this stuff. Rece, I didn't know this. Since 1970, Ohio State has won 2 national championships, 2002, when the flag came out against Miami, and Urban's 2014. 2 since 1970. Now, that's 54 years. It hit me, Rece. Ohio State puts too much on Michigan. Michigan is too much in the heads of – worry about winning national championships when you're Ohio State. You've beaten Michigan, 30 times in that 54 years, whatever. Rece, Ben Hartsock told me I'm nuts. Urban Meyer told me, yeah, it ain't going to happen. I'm like, this is warped. Rece, what's your thought on that?
I am 100% in your camp. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't be important or shouldn't be. And what you and I are saying is should as opposed to will. Will it happen? Probably not. But
no.
It should. There needs to be some different perspective on this, particularly now that we're in a 12-team playoff and Ohio State has an excellent chance of winning the national championship despite that embarrassment. Saban brought up the other day, maybe the most revered of his championships just because of the dramatic way in which it was accomplished was the 2nd and 26 game with Tua hitting Devontae Smith. You know who their only loss was that year? Auburn. And nobody ever talks about that except Auburn people or guys like me who bring it up to make a point on the show.
That's right.
And the same thing will be true for Ohio State on the outside. Now, internally, they want to beat Michigan. I asked Ryan when I went there a couple of weeks ago before the Tennessee game and had a conversation with him about reevaluating the approach. And he said, that's something for after the season. We're focused on Tennessee. I wonder about the countdown clocks, the thing in the rivalry, all of that stuff, the things dedicated in the building. It might be too much. I mean, even before the Indiana game, I remember Ryan making the comment that, their goals were to beat their rival, win the conference and win the national championship. No. I agree with you. You're Ohio State. The goal is to win the national championship. The goal, and you know what? Saban has a great way of putting this, and I'm sorry I keep referencing him, but I mean, look, this guy's the best to ever do it. And he said they never talked about winning a championship. They talked about being a champion. And, and all that entailed, your daily habits and practices and all those things. I think it is good to have a rival like Michigan that gets the juices flowing. Like I never bought and I've said this to Chip Kelly, and I said it to Ryan Day. I've never bought the nameless, faceless opponents. We don't know who we're playing. That's not true. Everybody knows that's not true. Right? Yes, you said it more clearly. I was trying to avoid using bad language on your pristine program here, but there needs to be an element, and I suppose that Chip probably exaggerated that for effect. There needs to be an element of nameless, faceless opponent we're going to play to our standard now at our level, while still acknowledging the extra juice that you get from Ohio State, Michigan. It just can't be the be-all, end-all where you take a guy who at the time was 68-10 or whatever he is now, 69-10, 70-10, and say, well, wait, we got to get rid of this guy. He's lost 4 in a row to Michigan. By the way, 3 of the losses, Michigan was better than you, period. End of story. Maybe you were close to their equal. The only loss that was bad and, not inexcusable in a lose your job way, but athletically speaking, inexcusable loss was this year. There was no reason on earth they should have lost that game. Bad loss. Let the court stipulate to that. Embarrassing, bad performance, probably a less than stellar game plan. Didn't play to their potential. All of the bad things that happen when you get upset happened in that game. But I think I agree with you that the intense be-all, end-all focus that, by the way, diminishes performance when you play them, when you put that much on it in many cases, needs to be reevaluated and fixed.
I agree. I don't know what you do with it. Like I tell people all the time, I remember picking up 75 cents on the court when I got my 4th foul in the first half playing at Purdue. People were throwing coins at me, and I'm like, well, this is different. I went to Alford. I go, hey, man, we got lunch money, on the bench. We beat them, and people are throwing stuff. So I understand, but I also think I understand a bigger picture. Speaking of all this, where are you at with this flag planting, the legislature getting involved? Is there a way to stop it? Where are you at with all that? Speaking of that game.
I don't want the legislature involved. That's ridiculous. But, I do think it is. I do think that it's kind of over the line taunting. And it's like one of those things, Dan, if you go in and you taunt somebody like that, don't be surprised when they come try to punch you in the face. Don't act like you're supposed to stand aside and let them come plant the flag. I think the better course of action is for the coaches to say, we don't need to do that. Because by the way, all the things I just said about Ohio State also apply to Michigan. You had by Michigan standards a pretty mediocre season. Celebrate your win. Have fun. You pulled off a huge victory that deserves to be celebrated. You don't have to go plant your flag in the middle of the field. To me, that's sort of like an over-the-line taunting. I know it's not a new thing. I know it's happened for years. But for whatever reason, now it's become more, more vitriolic, more rubbing your face in it. And if you go and taunt somebody like that, well, you can expect to get punched in the mouth, and I don't have a problem with I don't have a problem with Jack Sawyer trying to stop it. If you're going to run out there and do it, you have to be willing to accept the consequences of someone trying to stop it.
I was talking to Shane Beamer, whose team did it, later on, and he told me, I think we talked to him that Monday. He goes, yeah, Dan, he goes, I know my players were watching the Ohio State-Michigan game, and I saw that, and I'm like, crap, right? Because, you want to win the game, but you don't want an incident to take away from the win. Mm-hmm. Hey, last thing before I let you go. McAfee's a friend of mine. I've never met Coach Saban. It is Walter Matthau, and Lemon or whatever the hell back in the day, the Odd Couple. Has Saban?
Yeah, it is.
Has Saban surprised you at all?
I thought he would be great. I did not know he would be this level of great. I mean, the way he has let his personality come out, the way he's gotten comfortable, the interaction with and relationship with Pat has been just spectacular. So from that standpoint, I'm not sure you can help but be somewhat surprised. I thought he would be tremendous because he always was when he came to sit in in the rare instances when they weren't in the playoff. He was always just awesome. He's one of the most gifted, if not the most gifted communicators I've ever seen, in terms of being able to take something and make it very digestible and memorable and understandable. And then he's got all of these, West Virginia isms and sayings that, kind of make him funny. And I think those of us who knew him knew that he had a great sense of humor, but then he's been able to show it without trying to be funny, just being him. And, he's quick-witted, he's ridiculously smart. And, the dynamic on the set and the fact that he's been such a unbelievable teammate. And then the dynamic with Pat is, just been television gold. But you hit the right thing. I mentioned this to someone earlier, Dan, said, it worked on Broadway. It worked in the movies. It worked in a television series. When you get these two guys who shouldn't have magic and chemistry together, but they do, people love it. And it's been a great thing for our show this year, for sure.
Last thing, you have a choice to make here. You can be honest like you've been, or you can lie to me. You ready?
I will try not to lie to you unless it puts me in a bad spot. So I'll offer you that caveat.
It could.
All right, so go ahead.
Not a bad spot.
Okay. All right.
I'm watching Shane Gillis say what he said to Saban, and I'm thinking to myself, if I'm Saban, I am pissed off. That was and Saban had to be pissed off about that after the fact. Yep. Had to be.
Yes, he was. Yeah. I think you made that clear. Yeah. And you know what the thing is? Look, Shane's hilarious, great friend of the show, but he failed to read the room. And when he after he said it the first time, that was just a comedian trying to get off a joke that, with this particular segment of the audience didn't land, and he had the opportunity next, and I think he didn't quite read the room, and so yeah, and that's the thing. Coaches, you can tease coaches about a lot of things. But when you start going there, it's in their minds, it starts hitting at their accomplishments and their life's work. And so, here's an example, Dan. This is probably not an exact correlation. You know how tight Gillis and I are. We will bust each other's chops about everything imaginable. And Jay would probably, tell you that, you could tease me about 86 in the national championship game if you wanted to, but I won't, because I think there are things that hit a little too close to home, that are a little too important in someone's life. And whether Jay feels that or not, I feel that about Jay, so I'm not going to do that. And I think the same applies to when you start saying that someone's accomplishments came about because of some type of unscrupulous means. I don't think Shane seems like a tremendous guy. I've only met him a couple of times when he's been on there. I don't think he meant anything other than he's a Notre Dame fan and he's going to, bust some chops. I don't think there was anything malevolent necessarily about it. But I do think when he had the opportunity to dial it back and say, I was just kidding, he didn't read the room, quite the way maybe it needed to be read. So
Rece, you've emceed things, you've hosted things. The most important thing you can do when you're a speaker, you got to read the room, baby. That's the first thing you do. You got to read the room, man.
Yeah, that's right. I said something, Dan, at the at Lou's event the other night, which I ended up semi-emceeing, I guess. And
you got to read the room.
Yeah, I know. I mentioned to them, the national championship game is on Inauguration Day, and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance had said that perhaps he was having to make a decision as to whether he would go to, national championship game or to the inaugural events. And so I told the room full of Notre Dame people, again, reading the room, well, I think JD should go to the one he knows he's going to win, instead of going to the national championship games. Read the room. If I'm in the great state of Ohio, I probably don't say that, So.
Right. That's right. That is so true. Yeah. Who wins the game? Last thing, I've kept you way too long, but I'm having too much fun on a dreary morning here in Indianapolis. Who wins the game in your mind?
Dan, I think Ohio State does. I mean, I think that they're playing at such a high level, and the difference to me is they have more explosive game changers. I mean, look at the end of the first half of the Texas game, and it is true Texas probably got caught in a bad call, with 29 seconds left, and probably had a missed assignment, a missed gap there to take care of, and boom, Travion Henderson hits you for 75. They've got Jack Sawyer makes the play at the end of the game. They've got so many explosive playmakers. Notre Dame's got a great team, and they are capable of winning. But I think Ohio State and the playmakers make the difference. I think Ohio State wins a national championship.
Man, it's been fun, Rece. Great catch. I still remember the milk duds you gave me in Nebraska when I'd eaten 44 of them the previous day, and you came in with milk duds.
We had some fun, man. I still remember you swinging by and picking me up at the hotel in your car in Madison on the way to the game. You'd driven up, you're kind of flying in, stuff flying out of the car, and swing by and get me. And we have fun doing games, man. It was always a lot of fun to work with you, and I enjoy being with you on your show. Yeah.
Man, I love when you come on, and congrats on all the success. Game Day is terrific. Everything you touch is terrific, and I know your kids are doing well, and congrats, man. Congrats on all of it. You deserve it.
Same to you, my friend. I appreciate you.